Hi, I'm Eric Hanson, Chief Marketing Officer of Mitel, and I'm here with Zeus Kerravala. Going to have a really great conversation, so we'll just dive right in.
Sure.
So I guess the first question for you is, do you think that the industry is waking up that hybrid communications is more than a compromise?
Is the industry waking up? Well, that's a good question. I would say, by and large, when you say industry, most of the vendors know. I think the cloud pure plays still are going to market largely that way, primarily because that's the only, what's the expression, right? If the only, the tool in your toolkit's a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I will say the demand for it, though, is there, right? This year, I was at NRF, I went to Davos, right? I've already had 3 trips to Europe this year. And there, with digital sovereignty and trust and things like that, and all the global macroeconomic issues, and it's not just voice, right? The demand for all workloads and data to be now secured better, for companies to have more control of it, governments to have more control of it, is certainly there. And I would put voice as part of that, or communications as part of that. But I think for the most part, from a vendor perspective, there's a handful of vendors, Mitel's included in that actually can deliver it. I think for the cloud pure plays, it's difficult. You see them scrambling now, having to build sovereign clouds, things like that, within every country. If you're a smaller cloud pure play, it's very expensive to do, right? And so maybe you can build one in the EU or 2, but you certainly can't get down to a country or company level, right? So, but you are starting to see that more, especially over in Europe and other parts of the world, not the U.S., where it is becoming important. I will say for the regulated industries in the U.S., it has become a bigger issue there too. So your question's kind of a yes and no. I'd say from a vendor perspective, no, but the demand is certainly there from customers. It'll be, and I do think it'll reshape the vendor landscape.
It's interesting too, the rise, I think, of more conversations around private cloud as well, right? And certainly the cost and the availability of more modern capabilities in a private cloud instance, which obviously gives greater control, it seems to be more available. Are you seeing more demand in that direction?
Yeah, this is something, Eric, where I've been a little critical of the communications industry over the last few years. This shift to private cloud isn't new when you talk about cloud. In fact, when Andy Jassy was still running AWS, I remember when they rolled out their private cloud stack, and in the analyst Q&A at reInvent, he was asked, why'd you do that? You guys are the poster child for public cloud. And he said, because our large customers want it, right? And so you're already seeing private cloud instances of other critical applications. Communications is just lag behind that. And so I think it's more of an industry problem in that communications tend to lag a lot of these big trends. I remember back in the virtualization days, Mitel actually was the first vendor to virtualize a PBX, and people said you can't do it. Right? You could never do it, and then you can't run it in the cloud, and all these things came around, and today we are pivoting back to private cloud, for a lot of the macroeconomic issues and privacy issues, and country issues. But that trend's been happening a while outside of communications. We're just catching up.
Right. Fair. Yep. Do you think that we're entering an era where real-time communications needs to be closer to where the work is actually happening?
I think we're entering an era where everything needs to be closer to where the work is happening, which is why you're seeing such a big rise in edge computing. In fact, just got back from Mobile World Congress last week, and when you go talk to the silicon manufacturers, AMD, Intel, NVIDIA, all their investments today are being done for edge inferencing, right? Because we know how to build training clusters, we know how to do AI in data centers, but we're seeing a big rise in physical AI. We're seeing a big rise in customer experience driven from the edge, and so this is a shift that cuts across all tech sectors, where more and more we want to place the data and workloads closer to the user because it just drives a much better experience.
Right. Probably also another example of where certainly the use of small language or even localized large language models for performance as well as security and governance reasons, communications maybe has lagged a little bit, but certainly that's now starting to adjust.
That's a trend. I remember talking to Arvind Krishna, the CEO of IBM, about this 3-4 years ago when everybody was in love with LLMs. He had predicted back then the growth is going to be in small language models because you you high level train things with large language models, then you fine tune with small language models. So when you get into things like healthcare, retail, financial services, even company specific things, you have to have those small language models to be able to fine tune. Right. And most of that is done out of the edge. But I'll tell you something, coming out of MWC, from a silicon perspective and all the infrastructure providers, more and more investments are being made at the edge. And I think that's where you're going to see a large amount of economic value in the capital markets shift from what we've seen as traditionally AI-centric data centers out to more edge deployments.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you think we're exiting the AI experimentation phase into a phase of more monetizing impact and accountability and governance?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, at the NRF show this year, one of the retailers I was talking to, actually L'Oreal, they were saying that NRF, they felt this year, was less about technology and more about outcomes, right? And so you need to be able to prove the things that you do. And that trend actually, that was big at Davos, that was big. At Mobile Congress, companies want to know what their ROI is now. And so we can talk theoretically about all this stuff, but we have spent an awful lot of money on technology to drive AI, and now people want to know the returns that they're going to get from it. And that's been driven from a board level down.
I think initially there was a wave of fear of missing out with your competitors and so on and so forth, so everybody wanted to dive into the experimentation as quickly as possible. Now it feels, to your point, board on down, more ROI. Do you feel that's informing that they're getting better at this is what we're hoping to achieve from a strategy perspective, and then tracking that and adjusting as necessary?
It's an excellent question. I asked the CEO of one of the large global systems integrators that question, and he said FOMO drove a lot of AI interest. In fact, I asked him, I said, are people more scared of missing out or more scared of the security implications? And he thought about it and he said both, right? And
yes.
But but clearly, every company out there knows now that AI is going to change the nature of their competitors. And that expression, some people make things happen, some people watch things happen, and some people wonder what happened. The companies that wonder what happened in the internet era, they're all gone, right? And I'm talking some big brands that people thought would never go away, right? And I think with AI, everyone's expecting that transition to happen faster than we did before. In fact, you're seeing companies today, yourself included, you're rolling out features in new products faster than ever because you're able to use AI to leverage that. And so if you're not on board this AI train today, you're going to wind up being on the outside looking in, and that's just not a good place to be.
Yeah. Do you see the next wave of AI in communications, or generally a productivity enabler or a job replacer?
So it's both, right? I can't honestly sit and tell you that jobs won't be replaced. I can tell you the World Economic Forum released a report at Davos that said 90 million jobs would be replaced with AI, but 135, I think would be created.
So a net increase.
Definitely a net increase. And every technology shift we've had has done three things. If you think back to mobile, cloud, internet, I don't care what technique, PC computing, right? PC computing killed mainframe jobs, but put a computer on every desk. Every technology transition does three things. It eliminates jobs, it raises productivity, and it grows the economy, right? And so we are finding ways to work a lot smarter than before, right? And it changes the job. So I was talking to this one company about they're having AI write 90% of their code. So they need fewer coders, but they need more code reviewers. And so from a productivity perspective, they're generating 10x more code than they ever have in the past.
Right.
But a lot of the traditional coders have been now transitioned to code reviewers, right? And so you can see they have a net increase in the number of jobs, they're way more productive. And so the net of this is, at the end of the day, we're all going to be more productive. We can all do things that we couldn't do before. It removes in fact, somebody who runs a mental health organization used this expression, it removes the tedium from our jobs, right? Which makes us all more productive. But I can't sit here and honestly tell you there won't be any impacted jobs. There will be, but there will be a net increase in jobs. And so it's incumbent on everybody out there to just understand the job that you're doing. If it is tedious, it is repetitive, it's likely AI is going to replace that, right? So you got to keep your skill set current.
Jumping back to voice for a second, do you think that we're watching voice reemerge as the primary interface, whether it's critical communications and the common fabric that connects us all, or whether it's the natural language input for person to person, person to machine, machine to machine. What are your thoughts there?
I love that question because voice is the interface that we all are born with. It's the one we prefer to use, right? If I'm talking to you, I'm not sending you text now, right? That would be a little boring for everybody to watch, I suppose. But the reason we haven't used it in the past is because the system didn't work very well. If you tried to call a brand, you got some stupid IVA or IVR where you had to, the only value it had was you hit 0 to talk to somebody, right? And but I think more and more, we're gonna, almost everything we use, every application we have is gonna have a voice interface built into it.
Right.
So if I wanna book a flight, instead of using my airline's mobile app, I'll just ask it to book me a flight, and I'll have a conversation with it. It'll say, there's 3 flights going tomorrow, you prefer aisle seats, there's not any on the 1 o'clock, and you'll have a conversation with it. It's a much easier way to work. I think it's something people like, but every consumer electronics device you have, in fact, if you look at Google Glass and these things, or the smart glasses, they all have voice interfaces in them. Your home entertainment systems all have voice interfaces because they work today, and that's the big difference, is we finally, through AI, have a situation where, multi-language accents, all that stuff has gotten better, and so it's allowing us to take advantage of a medium that we want to use, we just haven't been able to use.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, as always, it's great to see you, and thanks a lot for being a part of today.
No, that's great. I love the line of questions, and I have written. Anybody can go Google this. Voice is going through a renaissance, and it's there's going to be a premium put on the ability to deliver highly reliable, secure voice, right? And that is a skill set that's not easy to just create as a startup today.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks, Zeus. All right, signing off. Eric Hanson from Mitel with Zeus Kerravala. Have a great day.